Some good news from the NPCA just a couple of weeks ago with regard to water quality at Niagara-on-the-Lake's Queens Royal Park. It's all part of the Niagara River Remedial Action Plan, which Natalie Green from the NPCA tells me that's been going on for a number of years. How many years?
35 years we've been working on improving the water quality and ecosystem health of the Niagara River.
What prompted that 35 years ago?
So pollution, historic pollution from years and years and years since European settlement, just culminating over time. So it started showing up in the early 1900s, and we knew that the Niagara River and other Great Lakes locations were polluted from human sewage waste, from the changes in the landscape and what we've been doing to the lands over time. In the 1970s, it started to become really apparent with bald eagles dying, with Lake Erie having really massive algal blooms. And the governments of US and Canada signed the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement in 1972 to commit to restoring and protecting the Great Lakes ecosystem.
Having grown up here, I'm familiar with the Love Canal disaster across the river. Has that affected the water quality, and is that something that prompted more work in the 70s?
Yes, absolutely. Especially in the 70s and 80s is when that became really apparent, and people were showing signs of being really sick. Love Canal, as you brought up, was a topic that was really top of mind at that time, and people were noticing higher cancer rates, miscarriages, a lot of human health impacts because they were living in a contaminated area. That site has now been cleaned up, but it was one of the reasons for the Niagara River being listed as what we call an area of concern in 1987, was shortly following that tragedy at Love Canal. And that site's been cleaned up now, which is great, but we're still doing some monitoring, and there is a program that parallels our program that is involved in monitoring the contaminants in the Niagara River to make sure that they have decreased, and they have over time, so that's really great news as well.
How did it come about that we received this good news at Queens Royal Beach?
Well, that is a lot of effort from different people, organizations, because as you know, cleaning up and protecting the environment is no one organization's responsibility. We're all responsible for protecting and restoring the world that we live in, and it sustains us, so we should be champions of the environment. So really it started with the Remedial Action Plan. We have indicators that we use to measure and track the progress on the Niagara River. One of them is related to water quality from human sources. We call it beach closings. So the Queens Royal Beach in Niagara-on-the-Lake is the only public swimming beach on the Niagara River, so we were really targeting that particular site. We knew there were water quality problems there. We were doing monitoring for quite a number of years, and Environment Canada scientists had done even DNA tracking to figure out, was it a human source, was it maybe from the birds, what was going on? And we tracked it down to a storm water outfall near the beach. Stormwater shouldn't carry human bacteria.
No.
But there was some in there. So we were, then it became, okay, let's bring some partners together. We got some funding from Environment Canada and from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. And Niagara-on-the-Lake led the project, though the NPCA was involved in coordinating and bringing the partners together. That's what the Remedial Action Plan is really about, is bringing people together for coordinated action to protect the river, really. So it started there, and then we started identifying and tracking down what the issues were. We started doing some remediation, and then monitoring as we were going along, and ensuring that what we were doing were really the priority actions that we needed to do.
Is that particular site also of special concern simply because it's exactly where the river meets Lake Ontario as well?
Yeah, absolutely, you're right, yes. And some people think it's actually Lake Ontario when they go there. Still the Niagara River, but yes, so the Niagara River flows from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario. So absolutely, what would be happening at that beach at that site could potentially have an impact on Lake Ontario. And that's why we've been doing this work as well. As the Remedial Action Plan is really part of a larger program to protect and restore water quality and ecosystem health of the whole Great Lakes. So the Niagara River is not the only one either. There are other Great Lakes degraded areas as well that other groups are working on.
Is there another targeted area along the river that the NPCA is looking at?
We've been doing other work. So Queens Royal Beach was a water quality problem. So we've dealt with that one now. Monitoring showed it's been restored. Some of the other issues that we've had have been towards habitat. So that's more towards the upper Niagara River between Fort Erie and the Niagara Falls. And because the shoreline has changed over time, you know, with humans and development. So we were targeting sites for coastal wetland restoration over the last about 5 or 6 years, and we've completed all 7 priority wetland sites as well. We have one more that we're working on with Niagara Parks called Gonders Flats. That's underway right now, so really tremendous news there as well. And then we have some other issues that are more towards the inland of the watershed, not just on the Niagara River itself.
Let's shift gears to Welland. Lions Creek, I know you have an information session coming up May 30th. What is that all about?
So as part of those issues that we're dealing with the Niagara River, one of them is linked to sediment contamination and how that can impact the invertebrates or those bugs that live in the interface between the water and the sediment. So if you've got contaminated sediments, it can move up the food chain. So that's one of our ecosystem indicators that we use. In Lions Creek East, there is a historic source of contaminated PCB sediments. We've known about them for quite some time, since the 90s, when the remedial action plan was first getting off the ground. It's the last remaining contaminated sediment site on the Canadian side. A number of years ago, we went through public consultation and a lot of studies were done, and the selected option for managing or dealing with those contaminated sediments were to leave them in place.
Just leave it there?
Just leave it there,
don't disturb it.
Monitor, make sure it doesn't get disturbed, to keep those contaminants under the water and under the sediment. They're quite deep. We've been doing monitoring for 15 years, and our monitoring is starting to show, or has shown, that recovery, natural recovery, is not progressing in some areas of the creek. So the public information session next week is about sharing those results with the public, kicking off that project and just telling people what we're planning on doing. We have some studies planned for this summer into next year, and then we'll be starting to look at what the options might be for managing those sediments, because from what we can tell, just leaving them in place is not working the way that we thought. So we've got to do something, and we want to involve the community and the residents who are living in that area. We want them to be involved in the decision-making process. So,
Natalie, how can they register for that information session?
So if they want to learn more and register, they should go to our website, getinvolved.npca.ca, and they'll find Lions Creek East on that homepage, and they can click there, and there is a link to register for that public session.
And it's on May 30th at the Flatwater Center. Natalie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.